Hello and welcome to Comics Corner with me, your host, Connor Nolan. Over the course of each episode, I'm going to break down a comic book story and discuss its main character's plot, talk a little bit about the fan reception, give it my own personal rating, and also where you can find the comic book. Now, sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about comics. Hello and welcome back, everybody, and today we got a great story for you. So, the last couple of videos we did were DC Elseworld books, and those are just asking, like, what if this one thing was changed, and, they tell the story of how that change implements the DC universe. Now, there is a Marvel equivalent, which some might say, because it's a little bit older, that that's where DC got the idea, and that equivalent is What If, and today we are covering the first What If story, which is What If Spider-Man Joined the Fantastic Four, which comes from What If, Volume 1, Issue number 1. And in case you didn't know this, and me not saying it enough, the publisher is Marvel, and it's from 1977. Other couple things to keep in mind is Roy Thomas is the writer. It's the first ever What If book, and it spawned a bunch of other What If books. And this Spider-Man has a cameo in Spider-Verse. Now, as I said, the title is What If Spider-Man Joined the Fantastic Four? So, if you can't tell who the main characters are going to be from that title, then I don't know why you're listening to this. The main characters are Spider-Man, who's got superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, agility, coordination, and balance. He's got the ability to cling to solid surfaces. He's got accelerated healing, a genius-level intellect. He is a proficient scientist and engineer. He's got the precognitive spider sense ability that warns him about danger. And he can utilize wrist-mounted web shooters. Then we have the leader of the Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic, who is a genius-level intellect. He has extreme superhuman elasticity, malleability, and durability. He also has resistance to the most physical assaults and immunity to electricity, and he has limited shape-shifting abilities. Then we've got the strong man of the Fantastic Four, who is often put on par with the Hulk, and that would be the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing, who is a skilled street fighter and hand-to-hand combatant, and he's got superhuman strength, stamina, and durability. And, in case you didn't know, he has got a rocky exterior. Then, we have the heart and soul, in my opinion at least, of the Fantastic Four, with the Invisible Woman, who's got invisibility, projective invisibility, so she can turn other people invisible, and she can also create, manipulate, and form invisible force field projections. Then we've got the hotshot of the team, who's literally the hotshot of the team, in the Human Torch, who's got pyrokinesis, a fiery form that enables flight, which also serves as a damage shield. He can also absorb heat energy, and he has resistance to extreme heats. Now, we're gonna move on to the plot. Alright, moving into the plot. The cover, I gotta talk about this. This is really cool. It's finagled and put in such a way that there's old comic strips behind them, and the Fantastic Four, which is now actually the Fantastic Five, is ripping out, and it's got Spider-Man dead center with the title of What If Spider-Man Joined the Fantastic Four. And because this is the first What If book, we also have to set up what If is. And for those of you that don't know, in the original What Ifs and a couple of the later incarnations of it, we had a narrator, and that narrator is Uatu the Watcher. A lot of people have a bunch of different ideas of how to pronounce his name. I go with one of the more commons, which is Uatu. Basically, he is this tall, bald dude that lives on the moon and literally just watches people. He's got superpowers and stuff like telepathy and all that blah blah blah, but he just kind of sits there and is like, pew pew pew, I'm just gonna watch these people and record everything. And he gives this little brief overview of how he's talking about how they're parallel worlds, and I just kind of sit here and watch them, and in some forms of the continuity there are like multiple watchers, and then sometimes there's just him, and then there's like other ones. So he's just like, I just sit here and like look at different worlds, and sometimes crazy stuff happens, such as what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four? And then he gives a couple other examples, and he's like, oh well, this one, the Fantastic Four, instead of Ben Grimm becoming the thing it was, Reed Richards. And then they're like, oh, and then there's these ones where two of them met and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay. And like, looking back at it and seeing how this is the first one, it kind of makes sense why they spend the first couple pages just like showing all of these things. Like, he's got one that's like, what if the Axis won World War II, and the only way that they would be toppled is if the Fantastic Four joined. And then they've got the Avengers fighting the Squadron Supreme, and then there's something about Martians and Deathlock and blah blah blah. And he's like, but that is in the past, and now all we care about is this story. And he gives a short one page. I don't want to say it's a one-page splash because it's got a bunch of different images in it, but it's basically a one-page splash of just going over the origins of both Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And then he's like, this is where we pick up, and this is where things get interesting. And I'm like, okay, we get it. You are gonna start telling us the story now. Let's back up, dude. But this story basically plays off of Spider-Man #1. And in that one, Spider-Man meets the Fantastic Four, and then he tries to join them, but they're like, we ain't got no money. He's like, okay, peace. But Spider-Man is, I want to say he's 16. He might be 17, but he's definitely between 16 and 17. He's still in high school. This, I want to say, probably is like right before he joins the Daily Bugle, because they don't really bring it up that much in this. Like, the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson's in it for like 3 seconds, and we'll get to that, but this is before he was like, oh, let me join the Daily Bugle. So he goes and breaks into an elevator to get on top of a roof, to shoot a web line, to then walk across it, to then break into the Fantastic Four's office. And I'm sorry, but that's like, I get it. You want to break into the Fantastic Four, show them how cool you are so that they'll join you and give you a bunch of money. But you shot a web line, you tightrope walked across. It's gotta be, at least 30 stories off the ground, something crazy like that. I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna tightrope walk across the 30-story. It's like height, like, it couldn't be me. But we got a bunch of photographers and stuff, and like, we gotta get these pictures of Spider-Man breaking into the Fantastic Four's headquarters, and I'm like, okay. So he breaks in, gets trapped. He breaks out of the trap, and the thing is like, you think you can break that? I was like, boom, just gives him a right hook, and I'm like, oh, that's gotta hurt. And he's like, ha, sucker, and then throws the thing into the Human Torch, and I'm like, whoa. Even when Spider-Man was basically brand new, he threw the thing, and the thing is famous for fighting the Hulk, so like, whoa. And Reed is like, okay, I got no problem fighting with people, but I don't want to fight people if I don't know what I'm fighting about. Like, he says, we don't want to fight any strangers, which I get. Like, I also wouldn't fight anything. And he's like, he doesn't explicitly say, but I will if I have to. But he's like, I definitely don't want to fight someone if I don't know why I'm fighting. So I'm like, oh, who fighting? I ain't fighting, boy. This is just my little exhibition. And, he's showing off. He webs up Mr. Fantastic. He uses the spider sense to deflect the Invisible Woman's attack. And then he just kind of jumps out of the Human Torch's flame circle. And I'm like, what? Like, don't get me wrong. Spider-Man is by far one of my favorite superheroes of all time, but like, come on, it's literally Ring of Fire. you're just gonna jump out of it? Like, what? But then they corner him, and he's like, oh, I wanted to join it. He's like, okay, so now I can join, right? And how much does it pay? And they're like, boy, I'm sorry, what? The thing literally says, that kook has rocks in his head, and I'm sorry, but like, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Human Torch is like, we aren't General Motors, we ain't paying you. And they kind of like explain what happens, and the thing's like, oh, but you're an outlaw, so why would we want to join with you anyway? And Spider-Man's like, peace out. And then the Invisible Woman says, wait. And this is where the story changes, because in regular continuity, Spider-Man just kept going. But in this one, he turns around. And so they kind of like discuss it, and they get in a big tiff, but then they decide, Spider-Man, you can join, but if you're gonna join, we need to know who's under the mask. And Spider-Man's like, do I not? And after like 30 seconds, if that, he's like, okay, takes off his mask, and then we cut to Peter going home to Aunt May. This is right after Uncle Ben died. Things are rough, and so he gives her his first paycheck. Then we cut to a news briefing, and this is where J. Jonah comes in, obviously. And Fantastic Four, like, we're not the Fantastic Four anymore. We are now the Fantastic Five. And they're like, oh, who joined? Spider-Man's like, what up? And J. Jonah Jameson is like, he is a menace. Like, what's up? And Reed's like, we got all of the charges straightened out. He doesn't have anything against him. And Jonah's like, okay, we'll see what happens. And then we cut to this little thing about the chameleon. Then we see a bunch of fights going on. We got Vulture versus the Fantastic Five. They make swift work of him. Then the Fantastic Five are going to go on a mission to space. And in normal continuity, it was the Fantastic Four, so the Invisible Woman went with them. But in this one, it is Spider-Man, Human Torch, Thing, Mr. Fantastic that go. And the Invisible Woman stays there. They go to fight... Oh, what's his name? They go to fight Commandre Gorilla and a bunch of random other dudes. And they make short work of him and his super gorillas. Oh, it's the Red Ghost. Oh, they go to fight the Red Ghost and his super gorillas, but you know, bish bash bosh, in and out, 3 seconds. And this is all on the moon. While this is happening, Sue's like, oh, what's happening? Like, something weird's going on. And then it's the Submariner. For those of you that don't know, the Submariner is in love with Sue. Sue is in love with the Submariner, but she's also in love with Reed. And it's very love triangle, because she like, at first she doesn't like love him, but she like likes him because he's mysterious and dangerous. But she also is in love with Reed, and it's this weird triangle that they went on for years. And he like asks her to come and meet him. She's like, okay, you gonna say something? He's like, psych, sucker, and then he uses a hypnofish. I don't know if hypnofish are a thing, but in this story it is, and for some reason it's hovering on the pier. It's really weird. And then the hypnofish makes this like air bubble thing, so apparently hypnofish can make air bubble things to put people into. I'm sorry, but like, if I was Namor and I had access to hypnofish, I'd be using those a lot. Like, those would solve a lot of my problems. I don't know about you, but I could use a couple hypnofish. But then we see the Puppet Master, which is a big original Fantastic Four villain, you know. A lot of stuff happened with him. He's actually I believe it is the stepfather of Alicia Masters, who then ends up marrying the Thing, but also dated the Human Torch at one point in time, but it wasn't actually her because it was a Skrull, so it's a whole big thing, but very tied in with the Fantastic Four lore. And the Puppet Master is thinking of all these ways that they could destroy the Fantastic Five. And, you know, the Fantastic Four Well, I guess it's technically the five. The five are working, but it's actually four because Invisible Woman's not there. But you know, they're working on something. They aren't. Oh. He's testing the limits of the thing's strength. That's what it is, and he just folds this giant 10-ton girder in half. And I'm like, first of all, why do you have a 10-ton girder? Besides the point. Namor shows up. They start fighting him. And then Reed's like, oh, wait a second. You aren't Namor. You're just a mental projection. And he's like, that's right. I got the Invisible Woman. You want her? Come get her. And so they are like, okay, well, I guess we're going to Atlantis now. So they go and take off in their submarine, which is funny because there's also another submarine around it because the puppet master, spoilers, is controlling Namor at this point in time, but they don't run into each other. And then as they're approaching Atlantis, there's the greatest line in this entire book, and I honestly, if I could get this panel or at least just this picture and the line on a shirt, I would never take it off. Namor is standing on the outside right before, right before the Fantastic Five go and meet him. And he says, greetings, surface fools. And I'm sorry, but that line is Namor to a T in the early days. And as they're driving up in their submarine, they get clamped down into a clam. A giant clam. What? Just is insane. But then he takes them to Atlantis, and he's like, I've got the Invisible Woman here. She's in like this glass globe type thing, trapped by an octopus, and like, this is my greatest trophy, ha ha ha. And they're like, nah, fam, we're gonna go get it. Johnny, who is the Human Torch, goes right in and starts attacking, and Namor is like, haha, I got this living weapon that eats freaking fire, my dude. So he gets taken out. Then the Thing and him fight for a little bit. Spider-Man fights him. The Thing gets trapped in this concrete type thing, which he then cracks the next panel, which is really cool. Mr. Fantastic and Namor and Spider-Man, they're all fighting. The Thing jumps into the tank, takes out the squid, grabs the Invisible Woman, jumps up. Then we cut back to the Puppet Master who's controlling Namor. It's like, Namor, shoot him with this big freaking cannon thing. And they're like, why would you want to shoot us? And he's like, I don't want to shoot you, but like, I kind of have to because I'm being controlled at this moment in time. Sue's like, he's not to blame for any of this. He's being controlled. The squid that broke out and takes out the Puppet Master sub. And they're like trying to weld together this giant hole that's in the wall in the bottom of the ocean that's pouring in a bunch of water. And they're like, Sue, you gotta settle this. And after all that's done, they take care of everything. And then they're like, Sue, you gotta decide. Do you want to be in love with Reed? Do you want to be in love with Namor? And I'm sorry. They expect this poor innocent woman who was kidnapped to decide if she wants to be in love with her kidnapper or if she wants to be in love with her nerdy boyfriend that doesn't pay attention to her. And they want her to decide in 30 seconds or less. I'm sorry, you cannot decide that in 30 seconds or less. It's wild. But after 30 seconds, she decides to go with Namor because the Fantastic Five don't need her because they have Spider-Man. I'm sorry. I love Spider-Man. Don't get me wrong. But if you ask anyone, if you ask knowledgeable comic book readers, who is the most powerful member of the Fantastic Four, there's going to be basically one of two options. Option one, which isn't technically a Fantastic Four member per se, but that is Franklin Richards, who is the reality warping son of Sue and Reed. Option two is Sue. And you know why? It's because of her force field projection. She can literally project a tiny little force field inside someone's brain and expand it. She is arguably the most powerful member of the Fantastic Four. So I don't know why she would think that because they have Spider-Man, they don't need someone that can literally explode brains. But that's beyond me. This is how they're doing it for the story. So he's like, okay, now you're going to get in this machine, and it's going to turn you into someone that can survive underwater. But because it does that, it means she can't breathe air anymore. So then they pop the bubble that they're in, and then the Fantastic Five go back up to the surface. And Spider-Man's like, this is my fault. I shouldn't have joined the Fantastic Four because now she's like no longer here. And Johnny's like, listen, it is what it is. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Your sister just said, peace out, I'm gonna become a fish person. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be like, it is what it is. But then, he's like, even if you hadn't joined, it probably would have, happened the same way, but at least we have a member. And then after that, we get a cut back to the Watcher, and he says a couple things. He's like, just keep out. This is what could have happened. This is what's happening right now in a different world, and I know everything. I'm the Watcher, and I will watch and see what's different from reality to reality. And then that's the end of the book. And then we get the come back next time for this. And it's really interesting if you ask me. But now we're gonna go on to the fan reception and my own personal rating. Alright, everybody, this is the part of the show when we talk about the fan reception, where you can purchase it, and my own personal rating. So, first of all, fan reception. It's really hard to tell. I did a fair amount of digging, and from what I could tell, I think people liked it. Because What If's been around for about 44 years. This is the first one. It did pretty well. So, it's easy to tell that people liked it. And for those of you that don't know, there will be a What If show coming to Disney Plus very soon. I can't remember the date exactly, but in the near future, What If will come out. So who knows? Maybe when they introduce Fantastic Four into the MCU, we'll get an animated version of this. Okay. Now we should talk about where you can buy this. The first place that you can buy this is in the trade paperback of What If. It's got this and a bunch of other different What If stories. You can also find it in single issue form. Well, you can find it in single issue form, obviously, but because this is an older book, prices are going to vary, condition is going to vary. You can also find it in online formats, like Comixology, and the Marvel equivalent of that. Now that's out of the way, I'm going to give it my own personal rating. After a lot of contemplation, I mean a lot, I decided to give this book a 7. I like the idea. Really good story. It's a little short, but that's understandable because, they only had X amount of pages. I like it. We get the cameo in Spider-Verse. It's chock full of information, but you have to have read it to understand it completely. But yeah, overall, I give it a 7. Thanks so much for listening to Comics Corner with me, Connor Nolan. If you like what you heard today, why don't you tell your friends about it and share it all around? And if you have any suggestions for what comics should be next on the show, leave a comment down below. And remember, comics are king.